All right, awesome. How many of you guys are technical in nature? Like programmers, coders? Well, yeah, you're a game developer. Put your hand down, Chris. Okay, awesome. So I was actually going to give a very technical talk, but this is more of a broad overview. Are you guys like game developers mostly, or blockchain engineers? Like what? All right, raise your hand if you're a technical person. All right, awesome. Welcome to the most technical talk I have given yet. So this is all about security and the user experience. A lot of this is going to be about improving the user experience and then the security considerations that come into play. So a bit about me. I'm a CTO for Blockade Games. I built a few games through Blockade Games. Most notably, we're making Neon District, which is a cyberpunk role-playing game. That'll be coming out in December. We already have a pre-alpha out right now, which you can play if you own a Founder's Key. And notably, I was doing a PhD in computer security at Penn State, and I dropped out of that to do Blockade Games. So I have a bit of a nuance, and I talk a bit like a professor, so I apologize for that. But first, to get this whole thing started, let's think about your mainstream gamer's player experience when they get started. So, of course, when you're a mainstream gamer and you want to play a game, the first thing you do is you go out and you find a really cool game that you actually want to play. So, step one, find a cool game. Step two, you find out that you have to sign up for a wallet. Okay, that's a little weird. You've never really done that before, but it's a sign-up process. That's cool, whatever. Sign up, download MetaMask, and then step three, you create a wallet. Now you're ready to go play your game, right? And then step four, there's an activation process. It's a little weird. You haven't seen this before. You don't know what a signature is. Doesn't matter. You've gone this far. You're not going to let this stop you. You hit OK. You keep going, and you find out you need to buy something before you can even start playing the game. So, okay, fine, you're determined. You are going to play this game. So you whip out your credit card, and then you find out you need cryptocurrency. You might have heard of Ethereum. You don't really know what it is, but that's okay. You're going to go through the sign-up process. You click on the deposit button in MetaMask, and you're like, all right, I'm going to go to SendWire. I'm going to set up an account, and I'm going to get started. I'm going to play this game. Step 7, you actually find out you're signing up for a bank account. At this point, if you are so determined, you're probably going to skip that process entirely. You're going to find your friend Steve from back in 2014 who was talking about blockchain to you all the freaking time. You're going to Venmo him some money, and then he's going to send you Ethereum. And then step 10, you're finally going to buy your asset. Step 11, you're going to play your game, right? Then you sign a transaction. You pay some gas. Step 13, you wait. And you wait for a while because you've never used gas before and you have no idea what it is. So you probably put the wrong amount in. So you wait a few minutes. Finally, it goes through, and now you can do the next thing in the game, and you wait again. And if you haven't dropped out at this point, you're going to run out of money, and you're never going to play again. This is not an appealing user experience, to put it very kindly. So what should your player's experience in playing blockchain games actually be like? This is not an endorsement of Facebook. That's it. Just sign in, play your game, collect non-fungible tokens. That's all you should have to do. So when you are building a game, you have to think about what is the mental cost for your players, because half the people who show up to play your game are going to leave within 15 seconds. And then for every single action that requires the user to think about something they've never done before, or requires them to wait, is a drop-off point. That means the current player rate is at least, the current player drop-off rate is at least 90%. Because the current blockchain game UX requires players to manage their own private keys, to buy cryptocurrency, and then to pay for every single thing that they do. And then they have to sign for every on-chain action, which means you're playing a game, and then all of a sudden this pop-up comes up every single time and requires you to sign something. It stops you from playing the game. It breaks you out of the experience. So don't touch my garbage. What pretty much all blockchain games are currently doing right now is we are thinking too much on building out complexity and then handing that to the user when all they want is just to play the game. So you have to think about what people have done in the past to take really complex technology and then package it in such a way that players can come right in and just play the game. So you want to push the complexity to the developer, not to the user. So the first thing you have to do is identify your priorities. As a game developer, who is your audience and what do you require them to know? Is it critical that your game is fully decentralized and trustless, or can you make certain concessions to make the experience better for them? Does the game model translate with decentralization and absolutely what needs to be on a blockchain? Also, gamers don't care which blockchain you use, as long as the promise of what you want to give them is delivered to them. They care about the end, not the means. So at Blockade Games, what we have chosen is to always focus on the mainstream audience, and we will do what it takes to build things to bring them in so they can enjoy a high-quality game. And that means our monetization as well is free to play, or as what we're calling it now, play to earn, which means that the player's effort and time should always translate into value that they can then realize by going to sell their assets on a mainnet. And that allows us, using that philosophy, to build a game that's been accepted on the Facebook App Store, which no other cryptocurrency application, to my knowledge, has ever been able to do, because we have abstracted the layer so much that nobody even realizes it until they get to the point where they want to realize value. And by eliminating all the friction points without any external marketing at all, we've had over 6,000 people find us and start playing the game. We've had over 500,000 non-fungible tokens minted on our side chain. And then we've had around 600 to 800 active users per day at the peak of Plasma Bears. And most critically is the bottom point, which is that the mainstream audience, we had people as young as 3 and as old as 75. Our grandparents found the game and played it and didn't even tell us, and we didn't have to tell them how to set up a wallet. So in order to provide a great user experience, we have to build the infrastructure to let it happen. And that means, sorry guys, you're going to start to glaze over at this point. This is where it gets really technical. We have responsibilities that we have to take on for ourselves to make things better for everybody. We have to think about smart contracts. We have to make it reliable, secure, and simple. We have to think about private key management, which is a very contentious issue, but you have to think about how you're worrying about your own private keys as the developer, as well as those of the user. That means you can help them with transaction signing and delegation to make things a much more seamless experience for them. If you are using digital assets, you need to provide liquidity. You have to do some sort of performance enhancement. And then most critically at the bottom is what we are promising to everybody in this new environment that we're trying to create, which is the digital assets should have a sense of permanence. They shouldn't just disappear. If you think about the Magic cards that you've had since the 90s, they still hold value. People are still playing the game. It hasn't gone away. But if you also think about your Pokemon cards, does anybody play Pokemon trading card game anymore? But how many of you still want to get one person? That's awesome. I was not expecting that, actually. Do you have a Charizard, like first edition from the very first basic set? Right? Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, but for a lot of people, like, I can't find anybody to play that game with, but I still hold on to my cards. Like, I still have Exodia from the original Yu-Gi-Oh set. Like, that's worthless to almost everyone because you can't use it, but there's such a nostalgic value to that, like you want to keep it. And that's what we need to deliver to people digitally. So, once again, how technical is everybody here? Okay, I might just kind of breeze over some of these. When you're writing your smart contracts, when you are developing them, you want to use the code that is already audited and tested because it is very easy to break smart contracts. This is code that exists in a decentralized database, decentralized computer, I should say, all around the world. Use the audited and tested code as much as possible, leverage Zeppelin. Write as little code as possible because then that reduces what is called the attack surface. It's the amount of weaknesses that can possibly exist in the code. You want to reduce that as much as possible, and you want to understand what kind of vulnerabilities come up, and then make sure that you've mitigated all of them, and ultimately get your code audited. Private key management. I'm actually kind of thankful that you guys aren't that technical because otherwise I'm getting into a lot of really bad arguments at this point. Because what we do for Plasma Bears in Neon District is we completely obfuscate the whole private key process for our players. We provide them with a central key repository that allows them to go in and start playing a game immediately. All the private keys, by the way, are stored on a Loom network sidechain. So the only thing that they currently own are the non-fungible tokens that we mint for them, but that still gives the players the ability to immediately gain blockchain assets and then be able to witness everything that happens on-chain because they can watch everything. And the compromise, what we offer for them, is when they want to realize the value, they can then take their tokens and transfer them over to a mainnet. Right now we have one to Ethereum. You can own your tokens directly in your Ethereum wallet, and then we're going to build bridges to EOS, Tron, Cosmos, whatever else supports it. So the other mechanism is what we currently do today, which is the user-owned keys, downloading MetaMask, right? So you own your keys, but you also have to buy cryptocurrency, and you have to manually do everything. It is the standard right now, but is also the worst user experience that we can give people, which is why cloud-backed keys, I think, are a really promising development. Portis is doing this right now. It's just like 1Password. You have a username and a password. It encrypts your private keys, and then it stores it somewhere in the cloud. And then whenever you go to log in, you just pull down your private keys using end-to-end encryption, and they only exist decrypted on your device. But there's some danger when you start managing private keys. If you are a game developer and you are not familiar with blockchain, please, for the love of God, bring in somebody who has done blockchain before or study it yourself. Because a few months ago, there was a game developer that decided to expedite the process of raising money, and they found out about this magical thing called cryptocurrency. So they decided to bring in a very popular blockchain game SDK without really understanding what they were doing. They pushed out their game to people about a month ago, leaving their developer minting private keys in the Unity build, and then distributed the game to all their players. Naturally, within a few hours, people decompiled the build, found the private key, and started minting tokens for themselves. So, be very cautious about this. And that means if you are going to be doing any kind of management for your users to make things easier, there are certain vulnerabilities in the way that you store the keys. Do not store them in cookies. Don't ever do this, because every single time that a network request happens, the cookies go to the server. It doesn't matter what it is you intend to send, your keys are always available, and that makes a lot of different attacks possible. So you want to store them in local storage, perhaps, but you need to encrypt them because cross-site scripting is still a very viable attack to steal private keys. And whenever you use the private keys, use them, understand the nature of the language and the environment that you're building in. If you're using JavaScript, only decrypt the private keys in the exact moment that you need to sign a transaction, and then wipe that memory, and then delete the variable. And then there's another mechanism for storing private keys that is fairly new, still being tested. There's the concept of a secure enclave, which is a region of your RAM, your memory, that is completely encrypted. Not even the operating system has access to it. And in theory, it allows you to sign without any other program being able to recognize this. But as a security researcher, or formerly anyway, before I dropped out, of course, I have to make note that there is still a viable attack for this. There's a vulnerability called Spectre and Meltdown that was discovered about 1.5 years ago, where you can snoop the entire cache and you can read out everything in memory. And while it sounds like it's more of a theoretical attack, that's not the case. Someone made a demonstration in JavaScript within the jailed wall of your browser, being able to read all the contents of cache and memory. So always understand that if your techniques are compromised, make the assumption that they are, and then are you using all of your technology correctly? How much time do I have? I'm going pretty late. All right, I'll try to speed it up. I've been timing myself. I'm like 18 minutes in, so sorry about this, guys. Scaling your game. There are a lot of different ways that you can scale, and you have to provide security on the sidechain and the main at the same time. So layer 2 technology is, of course, the current viable mechanism where you take a mainnet like Ethereum and you have a tethered sidechain in order to scale up your game. The most popular solution that has been available for the last year is Loom Network. I know that Matic is also working on something now, and they'll be coming out in, I think, a quarter or two. So the idea here is that you have your mainnet with all the promises of blockchain that we always give people, which is the liquidity, security, autonomy, and owning your private keys. And then on the side chain, you have all the benefits of blockchain, but you completely hide it from the player. But it's still a public chain. They can still read the data, and they can play with it, and they can do all sorts of cool things with it. There's a lot of developments coming out beyond this, and that is, these are mainnets with sharding. So these are layer 1 technologies that are essentially doing the sidechain tethering to a primary network, but they're providing it in one homogeneous package. And that's what Casper Labs, Near, and Ethereum is doing right now. There's also a hybrid version where you don't have to have homogeneous shards tethered together in the same network. That's what Polkadot is all about. You have all the different sidechains out there, and they're all governed by a similar consensus mechanism. So the same number of validators all protect all the networks. It allows you to scale, and it allows you to provide security to your players. And then this one is a little more arcane. This is a fairly, well, I'll just go ahead and say it. So On Ethereum, when we plan to have games that are actually building on Ethereum, we expect to have hundreds of thousands of players, minimum, millions of players. How do you scale that? We can barely scale today. CryptoKitties itself just took down the network for a month back in 2017. It does not scale. But what you can do is you can provide proofs of all the data that you have on the main network, and you can store all the data itself decentralized elsewhere. That allows you to give promise and deliver what you need to your players without breaking Ethereum. And then finally, in order to do this sidechain mechanism, you have to also provide them with liquidity. Users should always be able to get value from what they are doing. And there are two popular mechanisms right now for trading non-fungible tokens. Plasma Cash is a variant of Plasma that deals with atomic units. Blah, blah, blah. It is trustless, but it's also incredibly slow. It takes about a week for you to get your assets out. Granted, you don't have to worry about anybody stealing anything. Actually, no, that's not true. If you do any trades at all on the sidechain, then anybody that you've traded it to or traded the asset to you has the ability, in a way that I won't get into, to steal your tokens. So you always have to watch the exit gate to make sure that nobody takes it from you, which is why there's a better user experience provided by Transfer Gateway, which is a centralized mechanism of Plasma Cash. I'm totally making it a lot simpler than it really is. But essentially, by having an oracle that knows the state of all assets on all chains at all times, led by the game developer, then you can provide people with instantaneous, roughly, token transfers between networks. And that gives them the ability to realize their liquidity for their assets immediately. So our goal, collectively, for all game developers in blockchain right now, is to make this easy for millions of people to come in. And that means when you think about email, for example, there's a lot of technology that went into that to even make email possible and simple. And that's why a lot of this looks really complicated right now. There's a whole lot that goes into making the user experience great for players. But by doing that, it allows you to build a full independent game that people will play and not even think about blockchain, but still at the same time be able to realize all the value of real digital decentralized assets. All right, thanks.
Thank you very much. I think that was great. I mean, this to me is like the core problem of that balancing act between those two kind of issues, like simplicity. And I'd actually go further than you, rather than a Facebook login. What we've learned from registration processes is you should do the registration after people start playing, and only at the critical point where they're now engaged. In fact, even back to Free Realms, if you remember that in Sony Online Entertainment, they did an experiment back in, I don't even know what year. I'm old. I mean, probably something like 2008, I'm guessing. They found that there was they lost half their audience by putting the registration page at the front. And as soon as they put it after play, it was huge. It was just massive impact. And we found, I've been doing this kind of analysis for probably 20 years. I basically estimate an average loss of 50% of your audience for every click. Every single click, on average, you've lost 50% of your audience. So, the idea that you're trying to kind of streamline that is amazing and really important, I think, for blockchain. But I'm still kind of trying to get my head around this, what you were saying in terms of keeping that kind of security. When, how is there a fine line in terms of compromise?
Yes.
And I think the idea of you taking ownership on behalf of the player, I think sounds very solid. Do you think that's going to be the general approach that most people are going to take, or do you think there's going to be some other way where we can interface with, I don't know, some simplified, a MetaMask equivalent that just does it simply?
So I definitely think Portis, like cloud-backed wallets, being able to hide all of that is a really promising direction. I don't think the mechanism that we're using now, centralized key custody, I don't think that's going to be the long-term solution. We needed to build a game and push it out because we're a company. We have to start generating revenue. We have to start building products that people, play.
Pesky revenue.
Thank you. But yeah, so we're basically trying to solve the problem first and then go back and improve all the processes in between. So there's a lot of R&D that goes into this.
Yeah. And I think that's really the key. Does anyone have a quick question before we bring the panel in? The panel, I'm trying to get their attention. They're standing out over, behind me over there in the other room. Does anyone have any questions? There's a question over here. Well, I'll tell you what, I'll bring you the mic over. Cool. There you go.
Okay, so wait, what was it again? Right now, currently, you're doing. You said that you were storing the keys at least in the centralized server, and so. Have you ever, has any player really complained, because the promise of the blockchain was the transparency, that being decentralized, but since a lot of it is currently in your process being centralized first to be able to solve the problem first, do you see a friction between players because they assume that by playing on this platform they are doing something decentralized and they are seeing that it's not decentralized, it's centralized? Sorry.
I'm actually hearing impaired, so
Sorry.
that's why I'm trying to get closer.
Let me try and shorten this. Is there any friction between players who are looking for a decentralized experience but then are finding it to be centralized instead? Is there... Text? Yeah.
I think if I'm right, what you're asking is, are people going in expecting the decentralized experience and then finding that simplification scary because it seems to be locked?
That's actually a really interesting question. We thought we were going to get a lot of opposition for the way that we were approaching things. We got zero. No opposition at all. And a lot of these people were like just straight up blockchain people. They were all about like the whole ethos of cryptocurrency, right? Like pure cypherpunks. And it didn't matter. They went and realized the value of things by taking it off and putting on the private keys later, whenever they wanted to. They're more concerned about bringing blockchain to the masses, and that was a really refreshing experience, like a great response to get.
Yeah, I think that really sums up my kind of experience. Throughout the whole sort of cycle of 20 years of watching people, looking at, online gaming to mobile gaming, now to blockchain gaming, simplification and ease of access trumps everything else. That immediacy of experience is what wins. And why does Fortnite do so well? Because I can just go and play immediately. And I think the more that we improve on the UX, the more we improve on the kind of development cycle, the easier people will accept and adopt the games. And on that note, Ben, thank you so much.
Yep, thank you. Thanks, everyone.